It started with the kind of screech you only hear when metal kisses concrete at 40 miles per hour. I was in the middle of a phone call, sipping stale coffee and leaning against my porch rail, when I saw it, my trailer, my fully secured, legally parked, off-street trailer, being yanked by a rust bucket tow truck with Ranger Recovery peeling off the side in faded red letters. The driver didn't even hesitate. He reversed in like he'd done it 100 times, hooked the axle in one fluid motion, and sped off like he was late for a funeral. My funeral, apparently. Now, this wasn't some rundown scrap heap I was using for junk storage. It was a fully custom, government-issued, reinforced equipment trailer. Black exterior, secure locks, tinted utility glass on the side window. More importantly, it had a subtle but very visible Department of Homeland Security emblem etched right into the rear panel. DHS. Not HOA. But apparently, the distinction was lost on Karen Bensley, the recently self-elected temporary acting president of our neighborhood HOA. She had one of those power trip personalities that flourish the moment a clipboard and walkie-talkie entered her life. The kind of person who speaks in citations and thinks civil code, gives her the right to conduct search and seizure. Karen had been itching to find something, anything, she could use against me since the day I moved into Cedar Heights. I wasn't what she considered HOA material. I didn't attend board meetings. I didn't trim my hedges like I was prepping for a topiary competition. And I sure as hell didn't appreciate the 24 flyers she taped to my front door that began with reminder, yard aesthetics reflect community values. So when she noticed the trailer parked beside my detached garage, hidden neatly behind a privacy fence and not visible from the street unless you were deliberately snooping from a second-story window, she pounced like a bobcat on a squirrel. I already knew she was behind it. No other neighbor would have reported the trailer. I had talked to the retired firefighter next door. He used to store his boat in the exact same spot before downsizing. He even warned me in hushed tones, careful. Karen's the kind that measures blade height on your lawn just for fun. I dismissed it at first. Mistake. The HOA rules didn't prohibit trailers, by the way. They prohibited unsightly vehicles visible from the street for prolonged periods. But my trailer wasn't unsightly, wasn't visible, and wasn't abandoned. It was locked, monitored, and registered. But that didn't stop Karen from submitting an urgent towing request to the local contractor she was friends with, a greasy guy named Troy who once bragged at a neighborhood barbecue that he could tow a Range Rover in under 3 minutes. Which explained why my trailer was already halfway down the block by the time I tossed my coffee and sprinted to the curb. I didn't chase it. I didn't shout. I just turned, walked inside, and calmly opened a drawer in my hallway desk. Inside was a binder. Inside that binder were documents. And inside those documents was something I had been waiting to use for months now, Karen's original letter threatening me over unauthorized trailer storage. I had written, noted, in red pen at the top of the letter, then placed it carefully between 2 DHS clearance notices. You see, I don't just own that trailer. I work for a private contractor that works directly with multiple federal agencies, including DHS, FEMA, and the State Emergency Operations Office. That trailer? It contains sensitive electronic equipment, surveillance monitors, encrypted radios, satellite uplink modules. None of it classified, but all of it federally inventoried. It's used in disaster response, crisis communications, and occasionally, major investigations. And more importantly, it has a low-level Homeland Security tracker on it, something I had turned on the moment I saw the tow cable snap. It took less than 15 minutes before I got the alert. The trailer was parked behind a barbed wire fence in Troy's impound lot, which, to be honest, looked more like the graveyard of failed brake jobs. I didn't go there. Not yet. I had something else in mind. I made 2 phone calls. First, to my regional supervisor at the contracting firm. He's the kind of guy who says, Roger, that in casual conversation. I let him know the trailer had been towed without permission and contained equipment under federal inventory. His reply was simple: say no more. We're sending it up. Second call was to my cousin, who works in the county sheriff's office. She picked up mid-chew, listened to my story, and said, "Oh my God, was it Karen again? I swear she's on a bingo board here. Want me to escalate?" I did. I wanted this escalated to the point where even the HOA newsletter had to print a retraction in blood. What Karen didn't realize, in her desperate crusade to beautify the block, was that she had just set off a chain reaction involving 3 government departments, a federal asset recovery protocol, and one very expensive towing mistake. The emblem on the back of that trailer wasn't for decoration. It signaled legal jurisdiction. By towing it off private property, she had effectively authorized the removal of federal property without a warrant. And Troy? He had moved it onto his lot without inspecting or documenting the trailer's content. That's tampering, negligence, and possibly theft, depending on what was inside. By noon, the HOA email list exploded. Not because of anything I said, because Karen, in her infinite wisdom, had sent a victory email with the subject line: eyesore eliminated, community standards restored. She included a blurry photo of my trailer mid-tow, which clearly showed the DHS emblem, because of course she did. And because she couldn't resist the urge to brag, she even mentioned in the email, "Some people think they're above the rules. Well, not in our neighborhood." 2 hours later, unmarked SUVs showed up at the impound lot. According to Troy's assistant, who called my cousin in full panic mode, the agents didn't raise their voices. They didn't flash badges. They just walked in, asked for access to the trailer, and took photos of the tow slip. One of them apparently made a single phone call, and within the hour, Troy's tow license was flagged for review. Troy was not a happy man. He was, however, a very quiet man when he was escorted into the office with 2 plainclothes agents. The trailer, by the way, wasn't moved. It didn't have to be. They just made it very clear. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out. As for Karen, well, her moment was coming. She didn't know yet. But it was coming. And it was going to be spectacular, because I wasn't just going to let her off with embarrassment or a sternly worded letter. No, this was going to be a community event, a teachable moment. And if she wanted drama? Oh, I was going to give her a performance worth remembering. The next morning, I sipped my coffee like it was popcorn at a front-row performance, because as predicted, the neighborhood group chat, which I usually muted, was now more active than a stock ticker on crash day. Karen had gone conspicuously silent, which for someone who normally posted daily affirmations about neighborhood integrity and unified community aesthetics, was the digital equivalent of a total eclipse. But the real storm hadn't hit yet. That was still on its way. I had timed everything just right. See, while Karen thought she'd pulled off her little operation like some suburban secret agent, what she didn't realize was that the trailer incident had triggered a routine federal inquiry. That meant paperwork, incident reports, asset tracking, and, best of all, an official site inspection. Not of my property. Of hers. But before that could even happen, I made sure to give Karen a chance to crawl back under the rock she'd tried to build her HOA empire on. I printed out a copy of the federal registration document for the trailer, highlighted the DHS logo, stapled the letter from her original complaint on top of it, and walked it right over to her front door. I didn't knock. I just left it, neatly clipped to a bright pink clipboard, with a sticky note that read, "You might want to read this before noon." Then I walked home and waited. At exactly 11:52 a.m., I saw the blinds twitch on her second-floor office window. Not the first floor, never the first. Karen conducted all surveillance from what she proudly called her executive perch. Within 30 seconds, her front door flung open with the kind of energy reserved for people about to deny all responsibility. She stormed across her perfectly edged lawn like she was preparing to audition for Judge Judy. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of confrontation. I was in my garage, door halfway down, watching from behind a stack of landscaping equipment. She didn't know it yet, but I'd already been filming, just in case she got creative. She stopped at my driveway, squinted around like a hawk with a hangover, and yelled, "This is a misunderstanding," which was impressive, considering no one had accused her of anything yet, unless, of course, she realized the mistake was already out of her hands. "Then you'll be thrilled when DHS confirms that," I called calmly from the back of the garage, letting my voice carry just enough sarcasm to curdle milk. "I hear they're very forgiving about federal equipment mishandling, especially when the HOA gets involved." Karen blanched, just for a second, but her comeback was swift and filled with classic Karen deflection. "Your trailer was in violation of community standards. I was enforcing policy. I didn't know what was inside it." "Ah," I said, stepping into view, "so your argument is, you towed a locked government-marked trailer without knowing what was in it? That's your defense." She paused. Her mouth opened, then closed. For a moment I actually saw it, the flicker of something unfamiliar on her face. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. It was delicious. "I'll contact the towing company," she said sharply. "I'm sure they'll return it." "They won't," I said with a grin. "It's in federal custody now. And your HOA email with the Bragg photo got forwarded to the regional field office. They're very curious about your involvement." Her face went completely flat. "You wouldn't." I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, you did." She turned on her heel and stormed back to her house, muttering something about slander and legal advice. I could already picture her Googling federal property crime HOA with trembling fingers. But that wasn't even the best part, because while she was busy spinning up damage control, the real trap was already in motion. The next day, 2 black SUVs rolled into Cedar Heights at 9:06 a.m. sharp. Right on cue. They parked not in front of my house, but hers. 2 agents got out. Calm, clean-cut, serious. One held a binder. The other carried a small body cam. They rang the doorbell like gentlemen. Karen opened it like a woman expecting Amazon, not accountability. And the moment she saw their badges, her entire body stiffened like someone had replaced her spine with rebar. I didn't hear the conversation, but I did see her try to invite them in, only for them to politely decline and ask her to come outside. She stepped out onto the porch in slippers and a panicked smile, nodding rapidly, pointing vaguely toward my house like a third grader trying to shift blame. The agents listened, wrote things down. Then one of them pulled out the copy of the HOA email, her email, and pointed directly at the attached photo. She stopped talking. Just stood there, mouth slightly open, eyes darting. Then, in the most poetic of gestures, the agent turned the binder around and showed her the enlarged DHS emblem on the trailer. She tried to recover. She started flapping her arms, emphasizing how she didn't recognize the logo, how the trailer looked abandoned, how she was simply following local ordinances. But the damage was done. The agents didn't arrest her. They didn't even raise their voices. They just issued a formal notice of inquiry and informed her that she might be contacted for a federal affidavit, depending on what the report uncovered. She must have thought the worst was over. It wasn't. See, Karen had made one other fatal mistake. She involved the HOA board in the towing order. Specifically, she had forged a board consensus by falsifying vote tallies in the meeting minutes. Something I found out from the actual board secretary, Miss Eleanor Gribble, who only joined the HOA because she thought it meant free cookies at meetings. Eleanor was livid. She marched to my house with her tabby cat in tow and a stack of old meeting notes under one arm. "She never even mentioned your trailer during the meeting," Eleanor huffed. "Then she sends this email with my name on it like I co-signed it? Oh no. No, sir." With Eleanor's testimony, I filed a formal HOA complaint, one that automatically triggered a special review vote. And here's the cherry. Since Karen technically violated multiple HOA bylaws by forging documentation and unilaterally initiating property actions, she was immediately suspended from acting leadership. Temporarily, of course, pending further investigation. She screamed when she found out, loud enough to startle a mailman. I wasn't there, but Eleanor played me the voicemail. Karen shrieked, "You can't do this to me. I am the HOA." Which, incidentally, is exactly the kind of thing people say when they're about to not be the HOA anymore. I spent the rest of that week answering polite questions from federal officers and sipping coffee on my porch as Karen frantically walked her poodle 6 times a day, each time glancing at my driveway like it personally offended her. The trailer, by then, had been moved to a secure holding facility for inspection. But even better, my cousin let slip that Karen was now officially listed in the field report as the initiating civilian party. Which meant any fallout, civil, financial, or legal, would likely bounce right off me and land squarely in her lap. But I still wasn't done. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just watching someone fall, it's handing them the shovel, letting them dig the hole, and then selling tickets to the burial. And oh, those tickets were about to go very public. By the start of the following week, Cedar Heights was vibrating with gossip. It wasn't just about Karen's sudden dethroning or the SUVs that had parked outside her house. Those had already made the rounds on Nextdoor and Facebook. No, the real buzz was about what people didn't know. Everyone could sense something deeper was unfolding, like a neighborhood soap opera teetering on the edge of a mid-season twist. And since Karen had gone uncharacteristically quiet, no newsletters, no clipboard patrols, not even passive-aggressive notes left on trash bins, the vacuum begged to be filled. So, I gave them a show. It started with a little flyer. Just a half-sheet, tastefully designed. Printed on cream-colored cardstock, the kind Karen used to use for HOA bulletins. I slid one into each mailbox and taped a few on the community boards by the mail kiosk. It read, Special HOA Town Hall, Emergency Session. Topic: Leadership Conduct and Community Accountability. Guest Speaker: Asset Protection Consultant. Location: Clubhouse, 7 p.m. Thursday. I didn't include my name. I didn't need to. Everyone already knew who was behind it. By Thursday night, the clubhouse was packed. Retired couples, young families, curious teenagers, even people I'd never seen at HOA meetings showed up, drawn in by the lure of drama, justice, or free cookies, possibly all three. I stood at the front in a polo shirt and jeans, clipboard in hand, with a small projector pointed at a white pull-down screen. I could see people scanning the room, whispering, "Is Karen coming? Did you hear about the trailer thing?" I heard Homeland Security froze her bank account. They didn't. But I wasn't about to correct the rumor mill. Then, right before I started, Karen walked in. She wore a beige suit 2 sizes too tight, probably from her corporate cosplay days. Hair tightly coiled into a bun, makeup caked on like she was ready for court. She strutted down the aisle like she still owned the room, eyes locked on me, face stretched into the most artificial smile I'd ever seen. "Well, isn't this dramatic?" she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, don't worry," I replied with a grin. "There'll be no towing involved." Laughter rippled across the room. Karen flushed, lips twitching as she took a front-row seat, arms folded like she was preparing to sue the air itself. I clicked the remote. Slide 1. A photo of my trailer behind my garage. Neatly parked. Clean. Clearly on my property. Slide 2. The same trailer, in motion, hooked to Troy's tow truck, with the DHS emblem clearly visible. Slide 3. Karen's email bragging about the eyesore removal, her name proudly stamped at the bottom. The room went dead silent. I gave them the short version of events. I explained what the trailer was used for, without going into sensitive details. I noted the emblem, the federal inventory, the unauthorized removal. I explained how the towing company had been flagged for investigation, and how a federal inquiry was now underway. Then I transitioned into a discussion about HOA abuse of power, about overreach, lack of transparency, and forged board authorizations. That, while Karen was unraveling like a dollar store cardigan, I'd been quietly preparing my final act, not out of spite, but out of necessity. Because in Cedar Heights, the only way to keep a Karen from crawling back out of her hole is to fill that hole with truth, paperwork, and about 50 witnesses. So I did what any calm, sarcastic, long-game playing victim would do. I filed for a special HOA assembly meeting. Per HOA bylaws, any resident could request one if they had signatures from 25% of the homeowners. I got 43% in 2 days. Not because I'm popular, but because everyone in this neighborhood was sick of Karen. Apparently, my trailer fiasco had merely been the latest in a long line of petty infractions. A mother whose toddler's sidewalk chalk violated concrete standards, a retiree fined for using unapproved mulch color, even a teenager whose graduation balloons were cited for temporary visual obstruction. These weren't just inconveniences. They were declarations of war against normalcy. So when I showed up at doors, clipboards in hand, people didn't just sign, they vented. They unloaded. And by the time I got to house number 31, I realized I wasn't just organizing a meeting. I was building a movement. Meanwhile, Karen had gone full counterattack. She tried calling an emergency board session, denied since she was suspended. She started canvassing the neighborhood with glossy HOA pamphlets about restoring decorum and resisting outsider influence. She even offered complimentary lawn evaluations, which, judging by the number of shredded flyers littering her driveway afterward, didn't go over well. What she didn't know was that I'd already secured a venue for the meeting. The Community Rec Center, which doubled as our voting hall and occasional Zumba battlefield. It had a podium, a projector, and most importantly, excellent acoustics. I made sure every chair was set. Every document was ready. And when 6 p.m. rolled around on Friday night, those seats weren't just filled. They were overflowing. Karen arrived late. Of course she did. She made her entrance like a Broadway villain, flowy scarf, bright red binder, and the unmistakable sound of heels clicking like a metronome of denial. She didn't sit. She hovered, waiting for her moment. And when I stepped up to the podium and tapped the mic, she took one look at the audience, paled slightly, then plastered on a frozen smile. "Thank you all for coming," I began, voice calm, posture relaxed. This meeting was called to address an ongoing pattern of misconduct by acting HOA President Karen Bensley, conduct that has resulted in a federal investigation, forged HOA documentation, and multiple community complaints. Tonight, we're going to hear the facts. She raised a hand immediately. Objection. This isn't a courtroom, Karen, I said smoothly, flipping to the first slide. But since you brought it up, let's talk about the evidence. The first slide was a timeline. Day of the tow. Time. DHS tracking confirmation. The impound lot address. Then the HOA email blast, complete with her signature and the incriminating photo of the trailer. Audible murmurs rolled across the crowd. I moved on. The next slide showed her forged vote document, compared side by side with the actual board minutes, courtesy of Eleanor, who stood proudly next to me, arms crossed and satisfied. Karen tried to cut in again, her voice rising. "That's not what happened. I was told by a neighbor." "You acted without authority," I said, sharper now. "You bypassed due process. You falsified documents and towed federal property off a homeowner's lot. Whether you meant to or not doesn't change the fact that you put this entire community at risk." A man in the front row raised his hand. "My daughter's chalk art got her a warning last month. You said it was graffiti." Karen's mouth opened, but I pointed to him. "Exactly. This isn't just about one trailer. This is about abuse of power." Another neighbor stood up. "She told me my yard gnome was culturally inappropriate." "It was a gnome, Karen." Laughter rippled through the room, but I kept it on track. "The motion before us is this," I said, projecting the HOA code on the screen. Per Article 7, Section 3, the community may vote to permanently remove an acting HOA official if they are found to have committed acts of negligence, fraud, or willful misconduct. Karen finally snapped. This is a witch hunt. You're trying to destroy everything I've built just because you don't like rules. You didn't build anything, I said quietly. You hijacked a system meant to support neighbors and turned it into a platform for personal control. This isn't revenge, Karen. This is accountability. The vote was cast on slips of paper, old school, just to keep things dramatic. While the HOA secretary counted in the corner, Karen stood by the exit, breathing heavily, whispering into her phone like she was summoning legal reinforcements. But no cavalry came. When the final tally was announced, the room went dead silent. 91% in favor of removal. A few people clapped. Some gasped. But most just exhaled in quiet, exhausted relief. The kind you hear after a storm finally passes. Karen didn't say a word. She turned, stormed out, and slammed the door behind her. It was the most satisfying non-verbal resignation I'd ever witnessed. I didn't gloat. I didn't high-five anyone. I just gathered my things and walked out slowly, savoring the weight lifting off this community's shoulders. But the story wasn't over. Not quite. Because while Karen was no longer HOA royalty, she still had a bill to settle. And this time, it wasn't just angry neighbors she'd have to answer to, it was the federal government. A week after the vote, I got a letter confirming that the investigation had concluded. Troy, the tow guy, had entered a settlement with the feds. Restitution, community service, and a license suspension. As for Karen? She was named in the report as a civilian instigator, which meant she was off the hook criminally, but not financially. The federal agency submitted a bill for damages. It wasn't huge, just under $12,000. But for Karen, it might as well have been $1 million, because the report also recommended the HOA not cover any of the cost, citing her unilateral actions outside scope of authority. Translation: Karen had to pay it herself. The final act came when she tried to sue the HOA to force them to reimburse her. It went to small claims court. She represented herself. The judge dismissed it in under 10 minutes. I know this because I was there, sitting quietly in the back row with Eleanor and her cat. Yes, she brought the cat to court. Emotional support, she said. Karen left the courtroom shaking. Not crying, just hollow. And now? The trailer's back. It's parked in the exact same spot. Legal. Locked. Monitored. The emblem shines just a little brighter now. Like a badge of poetic justice. Every once in a while, I see Karen on her daily walk, eyes averted, scarf wrapped tightly, her gait less confident than before. She doesn't speak. She doesn't wave. But I know she remembers. Because here in Cedar Heights, she may have once been queen of the HOA, but now she's just a cautionary tale in a floral cardigan. I didn't intend to become a neighborhood legend. I wasn't out to wage war. I moved into Cedar Heights for the same reason most people do. Peace, privacy, maybe a backyard barbecue every now and then. But when peace gets policed by someone who thinks the HOA is a personal kingdom, sometimes you have to fight fire with calm, calculated paperwork, and maybe a federal investigation or two. After Karen's courtroom defeat, things in the neighborhood settled into a strange, refreshing calm. No more flyers taped to doors about mailbox uniformity. No early morning dog patrols by the Community Appearance Squad, which was just Karen and her poodle judging flower beds. People smiled more. Conversations bloomed across fences instead of sideways glances. It was like we all came up for air after months of passive-aggressive suffocation. I stayed mostly quiet, watching it unfold with quiet amusement. The trailer stayed put, untouched and unquestioned. Occasionally a neighbor would nod toward it and say, "Good to see the government still has our backs," and I'd just smile, sip my coffee, and let them believe whatever version of the story they liked. Sometimes the truth is better when it leaves a little room for imagination. Karen, meanwhile, had gone into what I can only describe as social exile. She was still in the neighborhood. She hadn't moved out, but she might as well have. Her social radius had shrunk to the size of her lawn. She avoided community events, walked her poodle at dusk instead of dawn. Even her infamous newsletter, the Cedar Heights Clarion, stopped circulation. Word is she tried to start a blog instead, but no one subscribed except her cousin in Arizona. But even exile wasn't enough for someone like Karen. People like her don't just vanish. They scheme. They stew. And about a month later, she attempted a comeback. It started subtly. A few flyers on mailboxes, unsigned of course, warning about new residents ignoring trash bin schedules. Then came the Facebook posts, under the name Cedar Eyes, commenting things like, "Some people have forgotten what standards built this community." She even tried holding a private HOA discussion at her house, but only 2 people showed up. One thought it was a garage sale, the other was there to ask about her lost cat. I could have laughed. I didn't. Because honestly, I had no interest in watching her spiral. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to make sure she never had the power to do what she did again. And as it turned out, fate had one final act to make that crystal clear. One Thursday morning, a crew from the county assessor's office showed up. Clipboards, cameras, fluorescent vests, the works. They were going house to house doing routine property audit. I waved, offered water, didn't think much of it. But when they got to Karen's place, something changed. They stood at the edge of her driveway longer than usual, whispered, took extra photos, then knocked on her door with the kind of polite formality that usually comes with fines. Curious, I asked the guy nearest my sidewalk if there was a problem. "Just verifying some inconsistencies," he said vaguely. "This one's a bit unique." I didn't press. I didn't need to. Because 3 days later, the truth came out. Karen's house, her pride and joy, her monument to HOA supremacy, had an unpermitted sunroom. Not just unpermitted. Built partially on a utility easement. Meaning it wasn't just illegal, it was potentially a public safety hazard. Apparently, during her HOA reign, Karen had bullied enough people into silence that no one questioned the constant hammering and construction trucks in her driveway that summer. But her addition had never gone through proper channels. No inspections. No approval. And worse? She'd quietly altered the property line map, submitted to the HOA database to cover it up. Digital tampering, caught by a system update. The county issued her a correction order. She had 2 choices. Tear the sunroom down at her own expense, or pay a hefty fine and apply for retroactive permits, which, given the easement violation, would almost certainly be denied. It was almost poetic. The same woman who fined people for mismatched patio furniture was now facing demolition of her illegal addition. And since she was no longer on the board, there was no one to cover for her. No favors to call in. No pamphlets to spin the narrative. She tried fighting it, of course. Filed complaints. Claimed discrimination. But the law wasn't a neighbor you could intimidate. And this time, the community wasn't on her side. That Sunday, a few of us gathered in our cul-de-sac with lawn chairs and lemonade. It wasn't a celebration. More like a neighborhood detox. We chatted about summer plans, shared garden tips, swapped old HOA horror stories like war veterans swapping tales of near misses. At some point, someone brought up the trailer. "Still can't believe she tried to tow that thing," one neighbor chuckled. "You ever think about moving it?" I looked over at the sleek black frame, parked peacefully where it always had been. "Not really," I said. "Feels like it belongs now." Someone else grinned. "You should put up a sign, 'The trailer that defeated the HOA.'" We all laughed, but I shook my head. "Nah. No need. Everyone already knows. That's the thing about justice, it doesn't need a banner. Sometimes it's quiet, slow, methodical, but when it lands hard. And in a place like Cedar Heights, where everything looks perfect on the surface, it's the quiet shifts underneath that really matter." In the months that followed, we held new HOA elections. Eleanor was nominated unanimously. She hesitated at first, claimed she was too old and too over it, but we wore her down. She's been fantastic, transparent, fair, even started a monthly newsletter called The Neighborly Note that includes actual recipes and pet photos instead of passive-aggressive edict. Karen? She still walks her dog. Still glares in silence. But now, she's just another neighbor with a past no one wants to revisit. Her sunroom was finally taken down, by a contractor she couldn't afford, according to the rumors. And her poodle, ironically, seems a lot happier these days. Freer. Like even he's glad the rain is over. As for me, I still keep to myself. Still don't attend board meetings. Still park the trailer exactly where it's always been. But there's a quiet respect now. A kind of unspoken nod I get from people when we cross paths. Not because I won. But because I stood up when it counted. Because I didn't scream, didn't rant, didn't play dirty. I just played smarter. That's the secret, really. People like Karen thrive on noise, on control, on chaos disguised as order. The best way to beat them isn't to shout louder, it's to let their actions echo in a room full of witnesses. And if that room just so happens to be a federal one, even better. So now, when I step out on my porch with my coffee, the breeze feels different. Lighter. Like Cedar Heights finally took a deep breath. No more wars over wildflowers. No more fines for decorative flags. No more emergency HOA meetings because someone dared to hang wind chimes. Just neighbors. Living. And one gloriously parked trailer.